You've probably clicked on this video because you tried to use the mega menu element within Bricks and you got something to work on desktop, but just doesn't quite click on mobile. I was in the same boat. I had something that looked like this, and I was able to transform it into this. So today, I want to take you through how to do this from start to finish. Desktop and mobile, all of it. We'll cover everything. We will build it all out in Bricks and then style everything in Sass. I tried to style everything in Bricks, but it was just tab after tab and having to write custom CSS everywhere. It was a mess. So we're going to do everything in Sass to simplify it. Without further ado, let's hop into this. Before we begin changing any of our navigation, before we build anything out, let's take a look at the default nav nestable. I have it added to my header. Let's look at what it's doing. What is it doing, right? Let's inspect our page in our front end and let's go down to a breakpoint and we'll notice a button appears and our navigation disappears. So I'm going to go back in here and let's look at our nav nestable. We'll see our nav items and we'll see a open toggle button. So the nav item at a specific breakpoint is hiding and the button is showing. So that's one piece of CSS logic we need to think about. And what else do we need to do? At an open state, we need to do something. So when the mobile menu is open, we want things to show a specific way. So add a breakpoint and on open. But how do we measure the on open? So let's take a look here. Here's our button. And then next to it is the nav items that we had. And above it is our navigation. Well, when I click on this button, well, notice our navigation gets a new class of BRX open, and everything below it can then be styled a specific way when it's on open. That's how we can use the logic there. So if I look at here, our UL is saying, hey, find the ID. So here's this ID. When it has a class of BRX open, so here's my BRX open, change the nav nested items to be opacity of 1. So it looks like it was set to 0. Is changing it to 1 and making it visible. So on open, make the navigation visible. All right, let's figure out now. We understand what it's doing. Let's rebuild this how we need it, because right now I do not want my navigation, my UL, to take up this entire screen. I'm working off a design and I want that UL to be a piece of the entire screen. It's going to be the lower half or the lower piece of my screen. Above it will be a mobile navigation, and then wrapping it will be another div to hold it all together. That's going to take up the whole screen. The UL is just going to be a piece. So let's rebuild it to reflect this model first, and then we'll rewrite the CSS. Let's rebuild this. So here's our nav items that takes up the entire screen on mobile. We don't want it to do that, right? We want to wrap this. So let's do that first. We'll wrap it in a block, and we will call this nav items wrapper. We also want a piece of navigation above it to have our mobile navigation right here. So let's do that. Let's add a div inside this. This can be just a block as well. And let's put this above our nav items. I'll change this to mobile nav. And inside that, we want a close button. You might notice over here on the right, there's also a back button. And this is when somebody clicks on here, this is going to show and a back button is going to show. We are not going to add this back button. We are actually going to turn this little toggle button here into this. And I'll show you guys how to do that. But all we need is a close button. So that's the only thing we're going to worry about. Let's go back. Bricks adds one for us. Right here in the nav items, there is a close button. So let's move this into our mobile nav. And so now we have the layout that we need. We need a wrapper with the mobile nav on top and then our nav items below it. Before we continue, we have to do one very important thing. Because we are rewriting all of the CSS, we need to go to Nav Nestable, go to Mobile, Show at Breakpoint, and change this to Never. We are going to control the breakpoint ourselves. We don't want Bricks to add in any extra CSS that we don't need it to. So let's turn that off. And let's go ahead and give everything classes. So let's start at our Nav Nestable. Let's just call this MM, a mega menu. Let's do our nav items wrapper. So MM will use BEM naming convention. So double underscore nav items wrapper. Here is our mobile nav. So MM mobile nav. Here's our nav items, nav items. Here's our open button, double underscore. Let's do toggle open. And let's go in here. We have also a toggle close. So double underscore toggle close. And inside our nav items, we got quite a lot. We have links. So let's give these classes as well so we can control them if we need to. Double underscore nav link. We'll remove the second one and just duplicate this top one so it has the class as well. Get this about. There we go. Okay, now our dropdown. What do we have in our dropdown? Dropdown and content. So dropdown is going to be double underscore dropdown with the content double underscore dropdown content. Now there is items in the content, but we are not going to worry about those because we're going to be building out a mega menu later in the video. For now, I'm only worried about the content itself. That's the only thing I need to control for now. So let's save. We'll refresh our front end and let's see what's happening. Because we turned the mobile menu to never, it's not going to reduce to the button here. We need to change that logic right now. So let's do that. Let's go to WP Codebox. I have a header partial in Sass, and I'm going to go ahead and create a media query. So at media, max width of 991 pixels. We want to do something. This is going to be our breakpoint. So at breakpoint, do something. Our first piece of logic. Now I could just leave this 991 pixels alone. However, I might reference this later in some other CSS, the breakpoint. So let's create a Sass variable for ourselves to use in the future. We're going to do navigation breakpoint of 991 pixels. And we'll reference this here, just so I have one location I can change it in case I use it multiple times. Now, what do we want to do? We want to, let's go here. Let's look at our nav. At the breakpoint, we want to hide nav items wrapper. So let's do that. Let's copy this. Let's go to our WP Codebox. At that breakpoint, we're going to do .mm. So we're going to wrap this in our mega menu. Inside of there, we want to find our items wrapper, and we want to set the visibility to hidden. Now, you might be thinking, how come you're not doing a display of none? And the reason I'm not doing a display of none is because I want this items wrapper later on in the video to come in from the left, and I want it to animate. If I set this to a display of none, I cannot animate display. So we're not going to change the display because then it messes up the whole transition and animation. So we're going to put a visibility of hidden. That way it's not accessible to keyboards. Next thing we need to do is we need to do the button. Right now it has a display of none. So at that breakpoint, we want to change the .mm toggle open button to display of, let's just say flex. Now it's showing. So let's see if we're working out here. There we go. Things are hiding and showing. That's exactly what we want. We're back to where we need to be. Now we need to worry about the open state. So let's look at the open state and let's find out what's going on here. Okay, nothing's happening when I click on the button. Why is that? It could be because I have visibility hidden on this. So let's uncheck this on my items wrapper, have it hidden. So if I uncheck that, okay, there we go. Now it's showing. So we want to say on open, we want to turn this to a visibility of visible. So let's add that logic in. So let's go down here. When our mega menu, and let's make sure that that logic is correct. Our navigation has the and we'll see the brx open shows up. So when the .mm also has a class of brx open, do something to the children. So .mm, when that also has brx open, do something. Mobile menu open, do something. Now, what do we want to do? We wanted to change the wrapper, the .mm nav wrapper, to change from visibility hidden to visibility visible. Okay, now we're back in play. Let's click escape, and now we're showing. Here's the problem. Use our selector here, and let's select this. We can see if I'm selecting this whole area, it's selecting the UL. I want the entire area to be my nav items wrapper, not my UL. So what is going on with Bricks? Well, Bricks is setting this UL to be a position of fixed and a bottom, top, left, right of 0. So it's taking up the full screen. I don't want it to do that. I want this to take up the full screen. So we need to change that to update to take up the full screen. Let's add it at the open state. We want to say our nav items wrapper. We want this to be position fixed and inset of 0. So this is top, bottom, left, and right set to 0. Let's take a look. If I'm looking now here in here in selector, I can see it's taking up the full screen, but my UL is still showing in a weird spot. It's still taking up the full screen as well. So we need to change this to not be a position of fixed. So let's do that. Let's say on open, let's target our nav items. We want these to be a position of static. Okay, now we're working. Now it's inside of our items wrapper. But let's add a background to our wrapper because it's clear right now. It's transparent. So on open, give our wrapper a background color of white. Still not really working because if I look here, my UL is set to a Z index of 1001. So let's set our items wrapper to a Z index of 1001. Now we're working. Let's click escape. But what's going on here? So we have our nav items wrapper is taking up the full screen like we want, but our mobile navigation is not showing. Let's see what's going on. Let's go to our button that's in there, our close button. We can see that it has a display of none. So we need to change that. We need this to show. So let's go on open. Inside of our wrapper, let's target our .toggle close. And we want to change this to a display flex. Now it's showing. So if I click this button, it should close it. Now this should, there we go. Okay, now we're showing all of our buttons that we need to. But this button's wrong. So let's go back in to Bricks, find our close button, add in an icon, go ion icons, type in close, and let's choose this one here. Okay, now let's refresh. Now we have the close button that we're looking for. So let's look here before we continue. Items wrapper is taking up the full screen. Our mobile nav is on top with our UL below it. That's exactly what we want. Now let's worry about the animation of this so that when it's open, it is going to show from the left. So what is happening here? When we get to a specific breakpoint, we want to make the items, so our whole screen here, our whole overlay, we want it to be pushed all the way to the left. So on a specific breakpoint, push everything over here. So let's go back to our breakpoint, and here's our wrapper. We want to transform, translate X, so left to right. We want to push it left, so negative 100%. And we are going to do a transition, transform. So target our transform, do a 0.2 second transition. For now, we'll do an easy ease in, ease out, and let's see what happens. Nothing happens. Why? Because on open, we need to set it back to 0. Right now it's pushed all the way to the left. So on open, bring it back to 0. So let's go back on open, transform, translate X back to 0. And let's see what happens. Let's close it. Let's open it. Oh, there we go. Okay, it's working, but when I close it, it disappears. And now here's the reason why. This took me a while to figure out. You guys are using hours of my time to do this very quickly. If we click on this close button, let's watch at this nav and watch right here. As we close it, we'll notice there's an extra class that's being added. It goes BRX open right here. There'll be BRX closing is what it's adding to that list. I had to record it and then watch that recording to see what was adding. So we need to say on closing. So if it's on open, BRX open, and .brx closing, we want to target our nav nestable wrapper. So when it's closing, because it adds an extra class, so it's like, hey, when it's closing, we want to also move it back to its original state. It's a bit confusing, but just trust me, that's what's going to solve the problem. So let's refresh. Opens, it slides up left. If I click it, now it slides right, or it slides back to the left. So it slides right, and then it slides back to the left. Okay, now we have our animation going. There is one small little piece that we want to fix, and if I bring this over, Well, notice because I said at a specific breakpoint, make our items wrapper move left. So watch when I do this. Watch what's going to happen. It's going to slide left. You see that? We don't want that to happen. So what we're going to do is we're going to say at a specific breakpoint, at that breakpoint, we don't want to make this a display of none because we'll break the transition that we have. We do want to set the nav items to a display of none because we don't really need that to show right now. So let's do that. At the breakpoint, inside of our wrapper, we have our .mm nav items. We want to set these to a display of none. Now, when we load over, look at that. Now it doesn't do that weird transition because we're hiding the child, the one that's actually showing, but we're leaving the parent to be there. And then let's see what happens. Make sure that we didn't break anything. Let's open this up. It is not visible. So we need to change it back. On open, we need to change it back to a display. So we are going to go to our nav items. So on open, go to our nav items. We want to display. Let's just do flex. But it looks like we're doing good here. So now we're showing. Make sure we didn't break anything else. On breakpoint, it's hiding it. The wrapper is being pushed all the way to the left. On click, this is going to come back. It's going to display, and this is going to move right. Let's work on the next piece of our mega menu. We want the drop down here. So this drop down content to overlay on top of our main navigation. So when I look at my design here, if I click on a drop down, this should show. Instead of having it like show directly underneath like it shows right now, I don't want that. I want this on top. So this will basically, it's not a very good example, but this will slide in and show on top of everything else. That's what I want it to do. We need to set our drop down content to a position of absolute. And then we want to set our nav items to a position of relative. So this will be an absolute on top of these. So let's do that first. I don't think I have referenced the drop down yet. So no, we haven't. So when the mobile menu is open, we want to work inside the open for these, right? Because this is only on the mobile version. I don't want to change the desktop version. The desktop version is fine right now. So let's leave it on open. I want to target my drop down. And inside my drop down, I want to target my .mm drop down content. I want this to be a position of absolute. And I want this to be inset of 0. So top, left, bottom, and right all be 0 to whatever the parent element that has a position of relative is. So when I do that, what happens here? I'm going to refresh here. So far, did I do something wrong? I feel like something should happen. drop down, drop down, content. So let's take a look here. Let's go to our drop down. So this one is open and active because we have it open. So it gets a new class. So let's keep that in mind as well. Here's our UL. And position absolute does not seem to be working. Why is that? Because the CSS that Bricks gives us is overwriting this because it's more specific. So I'm going to do a cheat code. I'm just going to do position absolute important because I want this to take precedence over everything else. So now it's disappeared because it is trying to find the nearest relative parent or grandparent. And if I click on the drop down above it, that has a position of relative. So it is positioning itself an absolute to the parent element. I don't want that. I want it to be the whole UL element or the whole nav items. So we're going to turn the drop down to a position of static. I do not want that to be position relative. And I want the nav items to have a position of relative. So I'm going to change the static to relative. So now look at that. Okay. Our nav items, so here, nav items have a position of relative, and our drop-down content has a position of absolute. So it overlays on top. Now we need to think about, I want it to come in from the right. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to say our drop-down content, we want it to have translate X. As a base, I want to push this all the way to the right. So 100%, push it all the way to the right. And it's going to disappear. Right now it's all the way over here. But here's what we want. When it's parent, so when the Dropdown has a class of open and active. Set the dropdown content to be transform 0. So it goes back to the left. So right now it's pushed all the way to the right. Let's move it back to the left. So dropdown, here's our dropdown. When this has a class of open and .active, we want to set the .mmm dropdown content to have a transform translate act. When it's active, we want it to be 0. When it's open, come back to 0, come back to where it should be. But when it's not open, there we go. Okay, so it's working on a base level, but there's no transition. So on the base level, without anything else above it, we want to set the transition of transform 0.2 seconds ease in out. And let's see if that fixes it. It does not. Now let's take a look why. So let's go here. We have position absolute. Display. Okay, so right now, without it being active, it has a display of none. We cannot animate if we're changing displays. So let's see what happens when it's active. When it's active, it has a display of flex. So when its parent has open active, it has a display of flex. So let's change it. So on default, it has a display of flex. So not when its parent is open and active, just on default, display of flex. Let's see if that fixes it. If not, I have one more idea as to why. Oh, but okay, so it's coming in left, but it's not going right. So let's look further. We have opacity. Let's look at opacity. Right now it's set to 0 because it's not supposed to show. And when I click on this, now it has an opacity of 1. Let's turn both of those off. And let's see. Oh, you know what? Let's do transform and opacity. Let's just add that to our transition and see what happens. There we go. Because it was adding some opacity changes, I had to make sure that my transition took those opacity changes in mind, the default bricks. So on default, let's transition, transform, and opacity. So now it transitions in and out. Let's take a look here. Do we have any navigation issue? Like, is it going to go to those sub navigation menus? It doesn't look like it is. However, it is showing all the way to the right. We want to set overflow on our UL to none or hidden. And it might actually need to be on the UL. So let's go to our nav items, our UL, and let's set overflow to hidden. And let's see what happens now. Okay, looks like we're looking good now. It's overlaying on top and we have it sliding in. So let's take one more look, make sure everything's looking correct. Let's look at my nav here. I can see my UL is not taking up the rest of the length here. It's only sticking to the top. So we want to, it is already a display of flex, and I think its parent, the nestable, no. Nav items here. Is this a display of flex? It is not. So let's change the nav items to a display of flex, and then we're going to change the nested items. So here's my wrapper, change it to flex, and then my UL, I'm going to set this to grow. So it'll take up the rest of the length here. So nav on open, set this to a display of flex. And on open, we want our nav items to flex grow of 1. And let's take a look now. Perfect. Okay, we're working now, but we need the items themselves to be pushed all the way to the top because they are showing in the middle. So let's go ahead and change this to, on the nav items, we want to do align items flex start. So it goes to the top. It might be the wrong one. It's the wrong one. We want to do justify content flex start. There we go. Now everything is pushed back to the top. So our UL is taking up the entire width here, or the entire length, and the items are pushed all the way to the top. That's exactly what we were looking for. Let's start adding some padding on the very top here and start getting everything aligned appropriately. So we'll just worry about this top navigation first. And I'll look at my Figma file and what can we see here? I need some spacing and I need some a border at the bottom. We need to target my mobile. Let's see if we already did it. My mobile nav. We have not worked on it yet. So okay, so when we have our mega menu open on mobile, so BRX open, let's go ahead and add in here our mobile nav. So let's work on that top piece. We want to add some padding to it. We want to be very specific with our padding. I want the padding to match the same as my heading up here. So I want to do the exact same spacing. I want to also keep the same spacing that I use for the side of my website. If you are not using ACSS, you're going to have to figure that out yourself. It might be pixels, it might be rems, but for ACSS, it actually gives me a variable here, var section padding x. So I'm going to be using that, but I'm going to copy this whole thing. And here's what I'm going to do. So instead of actually putting padding here, I want to create a variable. So we're going to see if it's working. We'll just check to see. We have some padding, but it's to the left. We'll fix that in a second. But I want to create some variables for my spacing, and we'll go into why we're going to do that. But first, let's just make them. I want to make two variables. I want to make a pad vertical, so v. This is going to be my up and down is going to be var space m. So using some more ACSS. This could be whatever you want it to be. And I want to do pad h horizontal, which will be my website's left and right padding for all the sections. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pull in my variables into my padding because I want to use the same spacing throughout my entire menu. So everything I want everything to fit the same side spacing and up and down spacing. I want it to all look similar. So I'm going to use the same variables. So pad my vertical, and I want to do my pad h and save it. We'll see if it still looks okay. We're looking good. Let's go ahead and let's move this over to the right hand side, and let's check actually before I do that. This is already display of flex, so I'm not going to do a display of flex. We're just going to do a justify content flex end on my mobile nav. Wrong one. Align items. Align items flex end. Let's try that. Now it's pushed all the way to the right, and let's go ahead and do our last piece that we need to think about, which is our button. So when somebody clicks on the drop down, this needs to take them to the new slide. So this slides over, but then a back button needs to appear. So we are going to use this button for accessibility. We're going to use this button in place of this. And so what's happening here? If I tap through this, we'll go to our drop down. If I click it with my keyboard, we'll see it's disappeared. But if I just click return again, it's there. It's still being clicked. So I want to make it visible. Right now it's not visible, so let's make it visible and let's push it all the way to the top. So we are going to find out how can we target this. Let's think about the logic. When I have my drop down open and active, move its, let's see here. Let's go back. What is this? Move the button. I want to target this button here. So when the drop down above it is open and active, move this button up here. When the drop down is open and active, let's find our button. So when drop down is open and active, do something to our button. We want to change the position to fixed. And right now it's not going to show anything. It's, if I click on this, it doesn't show anywhere. So we are going to do a top of 0 and a left of 0. That should push it all the way to the top left. So check this out. We have a back button functioning. So if I click on this, the button moved over here to the very top left, and now it's there. So we're working. We're almost there. We need to move it down. We want it to appear as if it is, if I hover over this, as if it is in place right here. Well, remember how we created those variables for the spacing? We're going to do top and left of that same variable to push it into a closer area. So let's do that. We're going to do top, which is our pad vertical, and our left is going to be our horizontal, pad horizontal. Save it, and now check this out. It is more in line. Okay, now what else do we want it to do? We want it to say back, and like right here we have the word back. What we can do here is say on our button, when the drop down is open and active, give my button a after And the content of my after will be back. When it's open and active, now we have back. Let's add some spacing between those. So we're going to add a gap on my button. So gap, let's just do 0.4 em. Now we have a bit of a gap. And now we need to think about this. We want to rotate this. Now we don't want to rotate the entire button. We want to rotate just the SVG. So let's do that. In our button, let's target our SVG inside, and we'll do transform rotate of 90 degrees. That might be it. Yep, 90 degrees. So now check this out. Now it's down. Ooh, I don't like the animation. We can remove that animation. Okay, there we go. We're on our way here. So to remove that animation where it goes down and then kind of circles to the left, we need to find the button on the non-active state. So I will go here to my dropdown. So when it's not open and active, so just here, I want to target my button inside of it. And this button, let's target the SVG, and let's do a transition of none. Okay, so not when it's not open and active, just its default state. Now there should be no animation there. How else can we make this better? We need, on the default state, let's make the SVG look to the right. So it looks like it's going to the right here. I can see here pushing to the right. So let's change that now. On the default button SVG, we'll do a transform rotate. I did 90 degrees on the last one, so let's do negative 90 degrees. That should make it look right. There we go. Now we have our button. And so look, check accessibility on this. Because it's the same button that exists, if I go enter on this, you can see it's already highlighted. So I can go back if I press return again, or I can go into my next item. Boom, boom, and tabs back. So accessibility is already there. We're just moving the button. This took me a long time. I tried adding a button myself and it wasn't accessible. And so I was like, let's just use what's available to us. We will run into one little problem, and I want to explain that right now. Let's say we wanted to add an icon size to this. We want to change this close icon to be a specific size. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's create it to be a little bit bigger. And we're going to make a variable for our size of our icon. So I'm going to do close icon size. And let's just give this a 2.6 rem. We can change it if we need to. Nothing's going to happen because we need to target our close button. Have I already typed in some CSS for my close button, my toggle close? I have. When it's open, is this nested? My nav, here's my toggle close. Let's give this a font size. And we can do font size because we're using an icon from Ion Icons. So it's not an SVG, it's an icon, so we can use font size. And we are going to do the close icon size. My icon should be bigger, but here's the problem. If we take a look now, this back button is not aligned anymore. It's like kind of slightly up. It's not too far off, but it's a little bit off. The reason is because the height of my icon is taller than the height of my button here. So here's what I need to do. I need to set the minimum height of my button itself to be the same font as the font size of this. So what we're going to do is we're going to find when the dropdown is open and active. Let's find our button and let's change the minimum height to the icon size. Okay, now check this out. Now it's in line. But what happens if I go ahead and make this even larger? Let's just say I go ahead and make this to 3.2 rem. Now the button feels just too big in comparison to what this is. Now these are smaller. So how can we affect these two when this is so big? So let's change the font size of our button as well. So let's do that. Let's go to our button. When the dropdown is open and active, so let's find our dropdown is open and active. Here's our button. We want to change the font size to the close icon size. And it's still not going to work, but I'm going to show you that. It looks massive in comparison. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a little bit of math, and we're going to do this with Sass. We're just going to, inside of Sass, we're just going to do size space divided by, let's do 1.4, and let's see if that works. Still, I think it's still a little bit too big in comparison, so let's do 1.6. So let's divide my close icon size by 1.6. That's looking closer. So what we now check this out. It's saying take that icon size and then divide it, right? So it's saying in relativity to our size of our icon, change it. And so if I change this to back to 2.6, it's all relative to the size of my icon. So now everything is lining up and everything's looking good. One little tweak we can make here. I think our back button isn't very aligned very well. So let's go to our, when the dropdown is open and active, find our button and let's do align items center. I believe that's the one, just to make everything aligned here. And I can check if this is the one. Yeah, okay. Just make sure it's aligned. We're looking good. So now that's popping up on the left-hand side. And we have completed our top bar. Oh, except for one thing. We want to add the bottom border. So let's make another variable, lots of variables. Why am I making a variable? Because there is the same bottom border that's being used throughout the entire design. So let's make another variable. So we're going to do border. And this is going to be 1 pixel solid for a variable that I have of shade light. Where do we need to apply this? We need to apply this to when the menu is open. We want the mobile nav right here to find our mobile nav when it's open. And we will say border bottom with our border. And now it should have a border on the bottom. Look at that. I close this. Everything's looking good. We need to make one small change that I just realized. We are doing a SAS calculation here with the close icon divided by 1.6 for our button size on this button right here. The problem comes in is if I try to, in the future, I come back and say, you know what, I want my font, my close icon size to be a variable. And let's just say it's a variable of like text L, which is an ACSS variable for font size. What if I want it to be that? What happens? So if I refresh, let me see what's going on here. And let's take a look at our font size of our button. This font size isn't working. The minimum height is minimum height, but because we're passing in var text L into the SAS variable, it's not going to work. So like if I change this back to, we'll make sure it's working. We'll go back to this. We'll change this back to 3.2 rem. And look, now that's huge. Here's our button. If I turn off this font size, we'll see something happen, but it wasn't working when I had the variable in there. That's because, let's put our variable back. That is because you can't pass a CSS variable into a SCSS calculation. So we need to change this into a CSS calculation with Calc. And we're going to wrap that with Calc. But now here's the other problem. We can't use Calc with a SCSS variable inside. So we need to do a little bit of a tweak. We need to do a hashtag with a bracket around our variable, our SCSS variable. And when we do that, it's going to transform it into normal CSS. It's kind of a weird little thing that we have to do here. So if I go back here and check on my button size, now my font size should be working. Now I can turn it on and off because it now understands what's happening. Kind of hard to explain. I don't know. We're going to be using this one more time in this video, but that's just one change we have to make. So in case in the future we use a variable for our icon size, when we're doing the calculations, we have to change it to this. So I'm going to change it back to the 2.6 rem that I had. And we're back to where we started. I want to clarify one thing. You might be wondering, how come I didn't just add padding to the entire wrapper? Well, let's do that real quick. Let's just, in the browser, I'm going to, on my mobile nav up here, we're going to remove the padding. And we're going to add some padding to my wrapper itself, to the entire thing. So let's add some padding of like 30 pixels. We'll see this border's fine. Like I don't mind it kind of being cut in, right? That's totally okay. It doesn't have to go the full width. But the problem is that if I have a drop down, so let's open this up. This looks good, right? Not super styled. But if I click anywhere within this padding, that drop down disappears. So if someone, let's say I have a long drop down that goes down here and people can scroll, if they accidentally click on the padding on the wrapper itself, it's going to remove that drop down. So we have to do individualized element padding. That's why we're not doing the entire wrapper. So keep that in mind. We don't want to do the entire wrapper. I'm going to refresh. Okay, let's add in our padding to our bottom piece. We've already done our top piece. Let's add in the bottom piece. So we need to add in some padding to our UL element. So our nav items. So let's find our when it is open. So when it is open, find my nav items, and let's add padding of top and bottom will be my pad vertical. And then we're going to do my pad horizontal. Okay, let's save it. Let's take a look. Perfect. We got some padding. Let's open up a dropdown. We'll need to add some padding to this as well. So to our inner UL, so our drop down content, we'll need to add some padding to it as well. So when the drop down is open and active, actually we could even do, no, let's do open and active. That's totally fine. When it's open and active, find my content and give it a padding of the same thing. Where was it? Right here. Padding vertical and horizontal. So let's save. Let's take a look. Now the padding is matching the, there we go. So everything looks like it lines up appropriately. Oh, and here's a problem. I put it into the when it was open. So I said when dropdown was open, it's open, give it some padding, but when it's not open, you see that padding goes whoop, disappears. So we gotta change that. We don't want it to be when the dropdown is open and active. So let's remove the padding here. We want to target when the content just by itself. Let's move this up so we're not confused here. I'm gonna X and we'll move this up here. Okay, so on the default setting, let's add padding here of pad vertical and pad horizontal. Now let's check it. Let's see if we ran into any problems. Now we're looking much better. If I click on the padding out here, it's not going to hide. There's a little gap there, but we'll figure that out. It's when I click on the drop down, I click on the padding up here, it's not going to go away. So we are looking a lot better here. Let's go ahead and let's work on the padding of the elements in here, and let's give them a border on the bottom. We want to target the LIs. Let's give them a border first. So in my nav items, target the direct LI elements. So target the direct LI elements and give them a border bottom. So when my mega menu is open, find my nav items, and in the direct LI, the direct children that are LIs, give them a border bottom of my, I already created a variable of border. So save. Now they have borders. Okay, so we ran into a problem here. I added padding to the entire navigation, the entire nav item. And so look at the borders are now cut in. So let's remove from my my nav items, I have my padding here. Let's remove that. We want to add it to the items themselves. So here's we can add them to the LIs, but what happens when we add them to the LIs? So let's add it here. I'll just go back. Let me copy this. Copy. Let's remove. Let's add it to the LI and see what happens. It's not going to work correctly. It looks like it works correctly, but here's the problem. You can see my cursor only changes when I'm on that small little portion. And on mobile, we don't want that. We want the whole entire area clickable. So we don't want to target the LI. We don't want to add padding to the LI. We want to add padding to the links inside of the LI. So those will be the nav links that we created, the nav links. So let's do those first. So inside the direct LI, we want to target the links with the nav link. And we also want to target, and the drop downs have a toggle. We want to target the toggle. So a div with BRX submenu toggle. I'm going to copy that. And we want to target the div with BRX toggle. Those we want to give the padding to. So padding of pad vertical and pad horizontal. Now we're going to run into, now that, okay, look at this is better now. I can see I can click on the entire box here. There is one problem here. We need to change the padding on the horizontal because it's super huge, right? We only want to do maybe half the size on the vertical here. so that it's half the size here. It looks like it's equal length. We're going to need to do another calculation. So on our vertical, we're going to need to do calc, and let's wrap this in calculation. We're going to want to divide this by 2. Because it is showing on both ends, we want to half it and half it here. So it'll be one size. But in order to do that, we need to also wrap this in a hashtag bracket, because our pad vertical may pull in right here, may pull in a variable. And in order to do this calculation, we have to transform it. Where was I at here? There we go. We have to transform it with this hashtag to turn it back into normal CSS. So save it. And now check this out. Now everything looks a lot more even, doesn't look so huge, and we can click on the entire thing. This has padding that looks great, but we're looking much, much better now. We need to prep our drop-down content. So when we have it enabled, so we have this is going to be our mega menu content. Let's look here. When we have this shown, so our content here, we want to make sure that doesn't overflow left and right so that I'm not able to slide it, right? We don't want users on mobile to accidentally slide left and right. So let's prep it to make sure that that can't happen. Let's set our drop-down content on, so let's go here. We're going to find on open. So when we're on our mobile navigation, find our drop-down and then find our content. Here's our drop-down content. We're going to set overflow of X to hidden. And then I also want to set any of its direct children, so anything that is a direct child of it, I want to set a max width of 100%. The reason I want to do this, and we're going to ignore this error, and you're going to see something that's future in the episode. I had to come back and make sure I talked on this. So just ignore that. We need to make sure that anything that gets added into our mega menu has a max width of 100%. We don't want it to extend all the way out, right? We don't want this content to go all the way to the right. We want to keep it contained. So we're going to put a max width on anything that is within our drop-down content to have max width of 100%. Just future-proofing ourselves. So now we are good. We shouldn't have any overflow issues. So let's try. I'm going to set this to a width of, let's say, 2,000 pixels. This LI element, can I scroll left and right? No, I cannot. Let me see. Do we have any? Let's add like a height to this of 4,000 pixels. And let's add a height to this one too of like add a height to this one of like 4,000 pixels. And so we'll see what happens. Let's do min height. Maybe it's doing something odd here. Min height. Minimum height. There we go. Now we should have some scroll. Okay, wanted to show you the scroll. We now have some scroll that's happening on our UL because our UL has elements inside of it that are super long. I don't really want this scroll bar on the side for my mobile users. I want to hide that so there is no scroll bar. What we're going to do is we're going to say on our drop-down content, we want to target let's see here, hide scroll bar. This is why Google is amazing. We can do how to hide scroll bars right here. WebKit scroll bar, and then there's a couple others that we need to target. So let's target WebKit scroll bar for Chrome and Safari. That's going to be a pseudo element of our drop-down content. So there's the pseudo element. Do a display of none. But we also need to target within, it looks like when I look at this documentation, I need to set these within my actual drop-down content here. Let's put that back. There we go. And this is going to be IE Edge scroll bar, Firefox scroll bar. Okay. MS overflow style none, scroll bar width none for Firefox. So make sure that we have all those down. Let's take a look. I'm in an error. Ignore that. That's future in the episode. Remember, I had to come back to show you this to make sure we dialed you in. So ignore everything. We're going to set just to see what's happening here, a minimum height of 4,000 pixels to the top LI. We're going to set on the bottom li. Am I in the wrong one? I am. Here we go. This li, min height of 5,000 pixels. And there we go. Now we have some scroll, but we don't have a scroll bar anymore, which is perfectly fine. That's what I want for mobile users. I don't want them to have a scroll bar if there is a height that is scrollable. That's totally up to you if you want to change that setting, but for my use case, I'm not going to have a scroll bar there. One last thing before we continue, before I move on to making this individual for my website, we need to worry about one item that Bricks tries to attempt to do, some math calculations with JavaScript. If I make this any bigger, I'm going to hover over my UL here. I think it's my UL. No, it's my content inside. So let's go here. Let's go. Oh, yeah. See, I think it's already messing up. It is. Okay, so let's find here's my dropdown. Here's my toggle. Where's my content? Okay, here we can see Bricks is on the dropdown content. We can see right now it's not showing. And it's at certain widths of the browser, it's not going to show appropriately because it's adding a style with JavaScript of left negative some kind of calculation with a minimum width of some calculation. We need to remove that on open. We don't want Bricks to be taking over the left and minimum width positioning. So let's go WP Code box. So on open, find my dropdown. Here's my dropdown. When my dropdown is open and active, let's find, actually, let's do it on the content itself. Let's do it not when it's open and active, just my dropdown and the content inside of it. Let's add a left of 0, important. I want to override what Bricks is doing. And a minimum width of 100%, important. I'm going to save. Now we're back to normal. It's because it's trying to do calculations on certain devices here. Oh, see, it's all, so let's see what happens here. Let's do that. Let's go here. Let's go there. Dropdown's working. Let's expand it. Let's see what happens here. It's working there. It's working there. Just a weird random thing. I don't know what Bricks is doing there. So let's make this bigger and click that and go back and close. And now it's being weird. Right, if we did a specific order of actions, but I'm not too worried about that. There's not many people that are going to close and expand this and click those exact actions, and I'm not too stressed about it. I'm not going to worry about it. But we just wanted to make that one little fix. When the mega menu is open, find my dropdown, find my content, set it to a left of 0, important, and a minimum width of 100%, important. Just make sure you do that, otherwise you're going to run into some weird glitches. We want to think about accessibility as well. We need to look at one specific item, and that is how the ARIA labels are set up for our dropdowns and for our open and close navigations. So we can see that here's our open button. If I'm in the builder, I click on my open button and ARIA label. I want to set this to open menu. So instead of just open, let's do open menu for the ARIA label. For the close button, we'll do close menu. So that when screen readers are reading this, it knows, it tells the user what it is that they are about to do. So open menu button, close menu button. And I'll show you that on using the voiceover as well. So here's the other thing we need to think about, the drop downs. If I'm looking at my design here, I have a drop down for men's and women's clothing. We're going to want to, let's just say I had this set to women's. Okay, it's going to update. The ARIA label that they're going to get when a user is using keyboard is they're going to go over this and it's going to say toggle dropdown. Well, that doesn't give them any idea of what they're actually toggling. So we want to say something like toggle women's navigation. And let's just add a link to this. This will be about, okay. And let's see what happens right now. We're gonna open up on the front end. We'll go to desktop. And we'll make sure that everything is working appropriately for accessibility.
Accessibility shortcut checked. Brave. MW. Entering MW. Link.
So,
Home.
link,
List 3
home.
items. Link. About. You toggle drop down. Collapsed button.
See, it says
Group.
toggle drop down,
You are
collapse
currently
button.
on a button.
So I'm gonna
Group.
actually refresh.
Reload this page.
Here's the
MW
new
object
one.
replacement character. You are link. Home. Visited. Link. About. Toggle women's navigation.
Toggle
Collapse
women's
button. Group.
navigation.
You
So
are
we wanna
currently on
be
a
very
button.
specific with our
Voiceover off.
dropdowns when we are making them. So if I make another one, if I have one for men's, so I'm going to duplicate my dropdown here. We're going to duplicate. This one's going to be for men's. We're going to for men's clothing and such. So I'm going to say toggle men's navigation. We want to change that so that the voiceovers understand, or when people are using the voiceovers, they understand what they're navigating, not just toggle dropdown. So keep that in mind. We want to think about our ARIA labels for accessibility. This is the part of the tutorial where I've shown you how to get everything set up for a base for your projects. We're going to hop into the specifics of my project and how to get it set up. For instance, I need to think about how to build out the mega menu, how to lay it out, and how to make it translate to mobile. And I also need to think about how I'm going to create the last item into a button, but also make it all the way at the bottom on mobile. So we're going to be looking at those particular items from my specific project. Let's go ahead and do that. For my project, I want to make sure that I have all of my navigation set up appropriately. So let's go back. I have men's, women's, our story, updates, and shop. So let's add all those men's, women's. We'll call this men's drop down. This will be women's drop down. And let's move the men's to the first, women's to the second. Here we can do our, let's see what it was. It was our story and updates. So our story, and here's going to be updates. Let's go ahead and add one more navigation to this. Oops, duplicate. And this one is going to be, what was it? Shop. It's going to be a button, shop. We want to turn that last button into, or last link into a button. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say, let's reload here. Let's look at everything. Everything's showing up appropriately. Everything's working so far. And we will create our last one into a button. So let's do this. Let's start desktop first. So on desktop, we don't want to do any, let's think about this. We don't want to do any logic. So not looking at any breakpoint, not looking at if it's open or not. We know at any instance where it's on desktop or it's open, we want it to be a button. So just in general. So we have our breakpoint stuff here. We have when open here. So here's all of our stuff. I can create another one. Let's just do down here .mm. So this will be our standard, just standard styling. And we will move this. Let's actually move it up to the top and Control X. We'll move it up to the top. So base styling will be above any other logic. We need to target our, let's see here. How can we target this correctly? We want to target the last item. So the last LI within my nav items. So .mm nav items. Inside those nav items, I want to target the LI, which is the last of type. Last of type. And let's take a look here. We want to apply on the last of type, we want to apply it to the link with the nav link. So let's go the last of type, so the last LI, find the link with the nav link, and we're going to give this a style, and we're going to make this into a button. Now you could in here type in like padding and background color, all those little intricate details. You can put those here, but because I'm using Sass and how I structure all of my CSS, what I can do is I can actually reference. If I go to my global CSS, and I set this up before, I have a button, and that is going to be button primary, .button primary. I can actually reference this class and give it all the styling I want with that class, with Sass. This is why I love it so much. Go to my header. Let's go to my last button. So we'll go last item turn to button. Okay, we want to extend dot, I think it was dot button primary. Now I'm going to get an error. I do cover these errors in my Sass tutorials. I have a whole playlist on Sass and how it works, how to do partials, why I'm getting these errors. So if you want to look at those, look at that playlist. But I am getting an error, but I'm going to ignore the error. And I'm going to check out on the front end. My button is now set up. Look at that. I have a button all ready to go. It looks massive, I think, on the screen. No, it actually looks okay on your screen. On my screen, it looks absolutely massive, but I think that's looking good. Let's go back to mobile here. Let's see what happens. The last one is a button. Not quite what I'm looking for it to look like. I think it might even have a border on the bottom. So let's think about this. I need to make sure that that border on the bottom disappears for my last item. So we're going to go back down to our logic. When it's open, find my nav items, and here's my last li, right? They're all getting a border. But let's do this. Let's do when it is not, so find all the LIs when they are not the last of type, give them a border and give them the padding and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to save it. I'm going to get an error. I'm going to disregard it, and we're going to refresh. Now this should not have any border applied to it. We're good. There's no border applied to this. Let's push this all the way down. So let's say on my nav item. So I only want to do this when it's in the open state. So nav items, let's create a new one. So this is when they're not the last of type. So every li that is not the last item. Okay. And we want to target the direct li of our nav items that is the last item again, but this is only for when we have the mega menu open. We're going to say I want to put the margin top to auto. So this is going to push it all the way to the bottom. Let's refresh. Pushes it all the way to the bottom. I don't want that. I want to fix some margins here because I can't do padding because the link itself, or I could do padding. I could do padding on the li because I did padding on the A. So let's do padding on the li element. So let's go the last li, do a margin. We want to do a padding of our pad vertical and our pad H that we added earlier in the video. So now take a look. Now we've got the button all the way on the bottom. It's got some padding around it to keep it the same as the padding up here. It's all the same padding. We want to center our shop button. And by the way, if this button for some reason is not taking up 100%, you would just tell it to take a width of 100%. I have something in there that's automatically doing it for me, but just so you know, you just change the width to 100%. We want to change the text align to center. I think I want it because otherwise it looks really weird. Let's refresh. Now it has text align of center. So I have all these navigations. Let's take a look. It works. I can go through here. I can go back. Our story updates and shop is all the way at the bottom. So I'm loving the way that this is working. Let's work on our dropdowns now. I want these to do something very specific. I want these to be the width of my containers. So if I go to my Figma file, these need to be the width of my container, not the whole width of my website. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to my bricks editor. Let's go here to our nav. Let's go to our drop downs, go to mega menu, turn on mega menu. And for CSS selector, we're going to choose our container. So I'm going to find the class that has header _ container and put that here. Header _ container. I spelled that right? I did. And we're going to go to the women's drop down and do the exact same thing. Dot header container. Save it. Go to the front end, refresh. Now we can see we have the width of our drop downs here. Okay, let's go further. We want to now style these according to my document here. We need some padding, border radius, and a box shadow. So let's target our drop down content and give it those items. We're going to do the basic standard styling. So on just basic on desktop, we want it to do something. So we are going to say, let's find our drop down. And we'll just add that there, and we'll nest it as well in here. So I'm going to target our content drop down content. Now let's add some padding. I'm going to do var space of medium. For my padding, I want a border radius, var radius s. I will try that. Let's refresh. I like the way that's looking right now. Okay, so we have good padding. I need a box shadow. I'm going to pull this from Figma. There's a really amazing plugin called Beautiful Shadows on Figma, and it gives it a layered shadow look. There are websites that give you the shadows like this. If you look up shadow, multiple shadow generator or beautiful shadow generator, you'll find something like it. But I'm just going to pull this box shadow from my Figma, and we'll paste it into my CSS here. Save. Okay, let's see. I have a drop down shadow now, but did I affect anything on mobile? I want to make sure content. I don't have any drop shadows going on here or irregularities. Nothing's looking weird on my drop down content here. Okay, so we're okay. We're looking good. Always double check to see if you've affected anything. It'll cause you problems if you don't. I want to add an effect. When this is hovered or when it is active, I want this to come up, like almost like fades in, right? Right now we have an opacity fade. Let's add a transform fade. So we're gonna say, let's see what's happening here. If you look at here, let's look at this element right here. There's gonna be a class added when I hover over it. It adds a class of open. If I tab into it on the keyboard, it also gets a class of open. So let's target that. We'll target our drop down, and when our drop down has a class of open, let's target our drop down content. And let's do a trans. Oh, I think I'm going to run into a problem. Let's just do this. Let's transform. When it's open, bring it up. So transform translate y. We're going to bring it to a 0. But on default, so just default, not when it's open, on default, let's do a transform. I'll just copy this up here. Of let's just say 40 pixels. So it's going to start from the bottom. When we open the dropdown, it'll move back to 0. So let's check it out now. Moves back to 0. Here's the issue that when I do it that way, I can see that there's like this weird glitch that happens right here at the very, very bottom. We have to figure out what's going on there. Let's go to header. Again, this is just live, me trying to figure out as we go. I thought this might happen. Let's go to the men's dropdown, go to the content, and toggle on click or hover. So I can keep it open at all times and figure out what's going on here. Okay, we have a transform on the dropdown content. Why, when the transform is active, why does it have problems finding out that bottom piece? Let's debug this. Let's go ahead and I'm going to remove my transform here. And I'm going to move it into Bricks. Bricks does have a transform content, transform on default. I want to translate Y. So I'm going to do dropdown. Let's make sure we have that active first. Have my class active. On default, move it down 40 pixels. On open, move it back to 0. And let's see if that causes the same problem. Maybe there's something that they have going on. Oh, it's the same problem. So it's a Bricks issue. Well, we'll have to let Bricks know about that. I don't know why that's happening. But let's go ahead and continue with our method. I don't want to put anything in here. I want to do it in mine. So let's go back and let's Control Z it. So it's not me, it's them. Something is going on there. I'll have to report that to their support. I don't want this to be at the very top on open. Let's move it down a bit. So on open, let's actually move it down like 20 pixels. So that we can see that button. Oops, refresh. There we go, it's moved down. So then everything below it is pushed down. We don't have any hover effects from here to here. Now, but I like this better. This is looking better. Let's go ahead and add in our content. Let's look at our Figma. I have 3 divs. Inside, let's think about this too. The content itself, the drop-down content is an unordered list. So any links that I have in here, I want those to be a LI. I want these to be a list item. So we're going to add a div with some list items in here, another div and another div. So we're going to go here. No, div list item, list item, list item, list item, list item, list item. That's what we're going to do. So we're going to go to my men's dropdown content. Here's my content. Let's remove these nav links. And we're going to add in 3 blocks. 1, 2, 3. This will be our link list. This will be a featured link. And this one will be a featured, did I spell that wrong? Featured link. Okay. What's in our link list? We're going to have 4 buttons. So let's add another div in here. We'll add a block because I want it to be 100%. And let's call this the link list item. Let's add a text element and an icon element. Let's choose our icon. Let's do that first. Ion icons, arrow to the right. Let's call this, I think this was hoodies. And let's give all of these, this is the text, that's the icon. Let's give these some classes. So we have our link list. We have our link list item. I'm going to copy this because we're going to have a few other items in here. This is going to be the link list item text. This is going to be the link list item icon. Okay, now we're moving. We're going to add in 4 of these. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to do hoodies. That's women's. Let's go to men's. Hoodies, t-shirts, shorts, shop all men. Hoodies, shop all men's. Featured link. So let's give this a class, featured link. I want to add in a text element, an icon, and we'll do an image and we'll set it to the background. So text, icon, image. Let's choose an image. Let's do this. Okay, that's way too big. Let's set to like 600 by 600. And here's our icon. Let's change our icon to the ion icons arrow. There we go. Okay, and we'll change this text to, I think it was best sellers. And we'll give everything some names here. This be just text, feature link, text, icon, image. All right, and we have feature link has a class, featured link text. I'm going to copy this because I'm going to, oh, no. Featured link text, featured link icon. Oh, that's not what I want. Featured link icon. Featured link image. And I'm going to duplicate this featured link. I'm going to delete this bottom one. We'll duplicate this so that we have 2 of them. We'll just change this image to the shoes, 600 by 600. And we'll change the text for this one to be lift shoes. Okay. It's going to look terrible. Let's take a look. Looks terrible. Let's make that look better. Okay. On default, let's go to WP Code Box. Here's our standard styling. Here's our dropdown. We want our dropdown content. We want this to be a flex direction of row. So left to right. I want a gap between the items of var space M. And let's see what happens. Let's refresh. Things are going left to right. That's exactly what I want. Let's worry about the links over here on the left-hand side. In here, our dropdown, inside of our content. Actually, let's not do inside of our content. Let's just not worry about that. Let's do it here. Let's just create a new one. We'll do link list. And inside we have our link list items. All right, let's add some. Let's first worry about our link list items. I want these to be a flex direction of row. So left to right. Let's check it out. Refresh. It is not changed. So maybe we need to change those list items to display of flex. If not, I'm sure I misspelled something. I'm absolutely sure I did. Link list item, not items. Item. See, I knew I did. Let's remove this display flex because I think it's already flex. There we go. Okay. I need them to be a flex, or no, justify content. I want to space them between. So space between, push them all the way as far as they can. Refresh. Now they're spaced between. We want to align them. Align items center. So they're aligned vertically. There we go. That looks better. Let's change the size of our icon. So in our list item, I have Actually, I can just do this. It's icon. So it's link list item and then icon. So we're going to target the icon inside. And we're going to do a font size of, if I change this to 1M, is that going to fix my problem that I'm having with these being large? It is. So 1M, because my font is set to a specific size, before it was set to like 32 pixels or something arbitrary, I want to set it to M so that because my text has a size, I want to set it to the size of my text that I have in here. So let's do a little bit larger. Let's do 1.2M. 1.4. I think we're looking much better. Let's refresh. We're looking much, much better. Okay. Let's add a border around my linked list item. Border. And I'm going to do this same border that I added before because it's the same exact color and everything that I was using. That's looking good. Let's add a border radius. Border radius is massive. We're going to do extra small. It just needs some more padding. Okay, let's add some padding in here. My top and bottom, let's do 0.4M. My left to right, let's do 0.8M. That's looking really good. Let's gap them in between. So we're going to do a dropdown content. No. Link list, our list that's holding our items. We want to do a gap of var space S. Refresh. I'm liking that. That's looking really good. I want the last item to be black. So this right here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and set that to inherit the same styling. So here's my linked list item. And I want to do the last of type. And I want to change this to @extend to the dots button. I want to say it was button primary. Let's save it and let's see what happened there. There we go. But I don't like that now the border radius is all different than my other buttons. So I probably need to inherit. Let's look at my buttons here. I have a border radius set here. I'm going to go to my buttons and I'm going to set a border. Sorry, this might be above your guys' head, but you guys can set this any way you want. You guys can set it in the CSS yourselves, but I want to think about maintainability. So I'm going to set a border radius button, a variable of button border radius. And I'm going to set this to 0.2M. And I can reference this anywhere within my global style sheet. So we'll go back to my mix and defaults. Border radius is going to be here. Okay. Save that. Oh, I got to close this. There we go. Saved. Now within my header, I want to reference my border radius here. Button border radius. So I can use that anywhere. Let's see what happened here. Now they're all looking the same. I'm liking that a lot more. Now everything's staying consistent with each other. We can even see this button is all looking weird too. What button was that? Sorry, I'm going off track here. This is my button ship border radius. I want this to inherit the same button border radius. Save. That's looking better. I'm going to check my design real quick. I do have things a lot more rounded. So like this is a lot more rounded than it appears here. So we're going to do a larger default of 0.4M. And that's looking more accurate to my design. Okay, we're looking much better there. All right, let's worry about, right now I'm not too worried about the styling of all of these. Let's go ahead and give them classes and let's make sure that they are correct. These linked list items, let's change them to an LI. all of them. I want all of these to be an li. 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 Okay. I want my featured link to also be an li, and this one to be an li. Anything that's going to be a link in here, I want it to be an li. Refresh. Now we have all of these as LIs. Let's add links to my text. So here's my hoodies. Let's just add a link to a random contact page, t-shirts, contact page, shorts, because that's where everybody wants to go is my contact page, and my shop, internal post, contact page. All right. Oh, these two. I'm gonna add a link to these. Contact page. We're gonna make these the links, the text, not the entire box. I want the whole box clickable, but we're gonna make the text the actual link instead of the what do you call it? Instead of the actual the whole div. This is going to be a long tutorial. I can already feel it. I feel like I'm going over. I'm exhausted. Okay, let's keep going. Let's keep chugging. This is looking good now. These are links. It does not link on the whole entire thing though. I'm going to go ahead and go back here. Let's go to my header. I'm going to do something really special. I have a mix-in for you guys that you guys can actually download called Clickable Parent. I will include it in the description down below. And I'm going to use this mix-in now. And this mix-in is really cool. So if I go to my header, I want to choose let's go back up. See, I can get lost here too. I understand. We're going to find the standard styling, and we're going to find the nav or the link list item. So the individual item. I want to do include clickable parent, and we're going to wrap this and close it. How this works is that I'm basically doing clickable parent on the list item. I'm going to put in the item that is my actual link within my list item. So if I look in here, let's open this up. Here's my list item. Inside my list item, the link is actually on the link list item text. So with this mix-in, I can go clickable parent dot link. I'm going to put some brackets here. Dot link link list item text, and we'll save. Going to throw me an error, but I don't care right now. What this is going to do is it's going to set the entire link to my entire div. So my link is actually inside the item, but it's going to move it so it's on the entire div itself. So I can actually tab through these. If I tab through them, we'll see that it also moves the hover effect or the active effect, focus effect to the entire element. So we're looking much better here. There is a weird glitch there. I'm not going to worry about it just yet. We'll worry about that later. And let's keep going. I think we're looking better. Boom, 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 boom. I do want to check accessibility real quick, so I apologize. It will get loud. Here's the voiceover.
Accessibility short checked. Object replacement. Toggle men's navigation. Collapsed button. Group list 5. Toggle men's navigation. Expanded button. Group. Link. Hoodies. List 6 items level. Link. T-shirts. UR. Link. Shorts. Link. Shop all men's. Voiceover off.
I don't know if you guys heard it, but it said list 6 items. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Because these are all LI items, it knows that there are 6 items in this dropdown. That's what we wanted it to be. If we didn't make those LIs, it would just be like link hoodies, link t-shirts, link shorts, instead of telling them, hey, you have 6 items that you're going to be going through. So it just gives more context when we add those LIs. Everything's checking out. Now let's do our featured link here. What were these again? I'm lost. featured link. Okay, so let's go back to our default here. We have .list, link list. I don't want to do those. We already have that styled. So I want to target within my default my mega menu. Let's target the featured link. And what items do I have in my featured link? I have an featured. We can fix this. Let's just do the and. We have the image. We have the icon. And we have the text. Now let's think about this. I want my image to be inside of it. So be absolute. Let's make sure that my featured link has a position of relative. Let's set the image to a position of absolute. So I want it to go through to cover the entire link itself, or the div. And we're going to do an inset of 0. Now let's see what happened. It's probably not going to look right. It looks all weird, right? Let's do a z index of -1. So let's send it behind the text and the icon. Okay, it's behind the text and the icon. Let's set the object fit to cover and the width to 100%, because I don't think if I don't do that, it won't work. So we're going to refresh. I also want to set a after effect on the image itself. So what I'm going to do is, let's do on the image or the featured image link, I want to create like an overlay. So we're going to do an after on our overarching link, and we're going to set content to nothing. We're going to set the position to absolute, inset of 0. So I want it to be the entire, cover the entire thing. And I want to do a z index of 1. Now this might overflow. Oh, let's do a background color. Background color HSLA. Okay. Hue. What's my hue? I have a shade that I use for everything. So I'm going to do var shade. And this is going to be my H, or my hue, that ACSS gives me access to. I'm going to do var shade, hue saturation. So S, my saturation. And then my lightness will be L. My lightness will be L. So I'm going to get those colors of my shade color, and alpha will do 0.8. So there, it's looking dark. That's what I want. Let's do a little bit lighter. So let's do 6. And let's close that. Okay, we want the text to overflow on top. So let's kind of change our icon and our text to color of var base, which is my white color. And I'm going to change the text itself to that as well. So let's do that. Okay, we can see it's not overflowing on top. So let's set the z index of 2 for my icon and a z index of 2 for my text. So I have the after set to 1. My image is all the way in the back. My after, or my overlay, is set to 1. So let's do this. This is the overlay. And these should be over on top now because they're set to a z index of 2. Now they're on top. We're looking much better. Okay. I need some padding, and let's do var space S. Let's check it out. I think that looks good. I want to do a border radius S. And if I do this, we'll notice that it's not going to work correctly because I need to do an overflow of hidden. The image is going outside of it right now. So we're going to do overflow of hidden. Also, I'm speeding through this. I apologize, guys. We want to set everything to the bottom. So we want this all to go to the bottom. So let's go back. It's on the top right now. Justify, content, flex end. Again, I always get these two mixed up. There we go. Push to the bottom. We want our text to be a font size. Again, you guys can set this on your own, but I'm using a variable of H4, like something like an H4, and it'll inherit the size of my type scales. 3 var H3. It does. That's what I want. Okay. I also want the font family clash display. Let's update. Let's see what happened here. It's better. We want a font weight of 700. There we go. We wanted it bold. Right now we don't have the whole box clickable, so we'll have to fix that, but we'll do that in a second. Let's make our icon a position of absolute, and we want to set the top to 0 and the right to 0. And let's see what happens here. It's going to be the top right. I don't want that. Let's do a 10 pixels. because I can do pixels for these. Not what I want. Let's do 20 pixels. And what's also happening too is the font size for this is crazy huge. Like that is way too big. So I'm going to turn that down. We'll do like a font size of 5 rem. Let's do 4. 4 will be the sweet spot. I'm calling it now. There we go. That looks pretty good. It doesn't look completely accurate, but it's okay. We're going to do a transform, rotate of 45 degrees. Nope, wrong way. Negative 45. Negative 45 degrees. There we go. Now it's pointing up to the right. I think we're very, very close. I also just want to set a height for, or no. I want to set this link. So we're going to use the clickable parent again on my featured link. I'm going to do @include clickable parent. And this is on the featured link. So on my wrapper, I'm doing the clickable parent. I'm going to reference the child. I'm going to say in there, find my .mm featured link text and make that link the entire box. And so now the entire box is clickable. Look at that, goes to my contact page. The entire box. If I tap through here, the entire box is clickable. Great. Okay, we are rolling on that. I think we're almost done. Let's check our, oh, I just closed it. Let's check our mobile device here. Let's see what's happening. Everything is left and right. We need to switch that. On mobile, we want our content to be up and down. So let's go back and we have to find this in here. When open on mobile, we want to find our content. So drop down, content. We want to set this to a flex direction of column. Let's refresh. Let's open this up. Everything is showing in a column now. Problem is these don't have a height set. So let's set a minimum height for those. Let's go on my drop-down content. I want to set the featured link to have a set height. So we'll do on my content, inside my content, on default, I want my featured link to have a minimum height 200 pixels, so 20 rem. Let's refresh. Let's check it out. Wrong one. That's looking better. They're not too massive, but they look good, and they should look good on mobile too. I like that a lot. Now let's swap these. I want my link list to be at the very bottom. So I want these on top and this to be on the bottom. So we need to do a little bit of reordering. We're going to do my featured link. I want to set to a order of 1. Let's see if that just fixes it. I might have just fixed the problem without having to fix. Nope, I don't. Okay, we need to target my link list. And we need to set this to an order of 2. There we go. We've moved it to the bottom. And I like this a lot more. So here's our mobile nav now. Bestsellers, link shoes, hoodies. And if I go through here, that's totally okay. I don't need them to be any different than that. And I'm going to do, just for time's sake, I'm just going to duplicate my women's one. So let's go to my header, or my men's one. Men's, drop down. I'm going to delete my women's, duplicate this, and we're going to go, the second one is women's. Toggle women's navigation. Save. Women's is leggings, sports bras, hoodies, shop all women. Women's is shop all women. And what are these ones? This is bestsellers. Hashtag fight fit competition. Men's is looking good. Women's is looking good. The images are terrible. Let's swap those out. Technically, you guys don't need to really watch me do this, but oh, whatever. Browse. We're going to do gym, women. And let's just grab you. Okay. Let's do that. Insert. Let's do our fight fit competition. We're going to do, oops, let's do unsplash, unsplash. Let's do this. Sure, why not? This is different, but that's okay. There we go. Insert. And save. Let's check out, make sure everything's working good. This is looking fantastic. Let's check on mobile one more time. Here, men's, bestsellers, lift shoes, women's, bestsellers, fight fit. This is looking really good. Leggings, sports bras. I think we're done. I don't see any other check. There's no overflow issues. Nothing here. I'm gonna have to check this on mobile myself to make sure it's working, but this is exactly what I'm looking for. Guys, I think we're done. We do have that one small issue where on desktop, see, like if you resize the screen while you have it open, there's gonna be issues because Bricks doesn't know what's going on. We're good. These links are all set up. I have navigation to all my elements in here. And I have navigation to all these too. We did it. I'm calling it. That's it. All right. I'm gonna end this video. If you've made it through this entire video, I applaud you. That was a very long video. We did a lot. We accomplished a lot. I hope that you are going to take this and build something amazing for your clients, for your own websites. I hope that this was valuable information. I am working on a template for this. Something where you can get the desktop and the mobile version up very quickly. You have options to turn things on and off, like change the last item to a button, push the button all the way to the bottom, change the mobile slide-in direction, and a bunch of other logic. I plan to release that with this video, but it was holding up the release of this video. So I wanted to get this out first. And when I have the opportunity, I want to release that template for you guys. This is not the typical template that you are used to. For instance, frames or those other template libraries. This is going to be very different. So keep an eye out for that. I will be posting a video outlining how that works and showing you guys how to build very quickly with that template. Again, thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting, and I will see you guys in the next video.